The village of Eld Hollow was the kind of place where time seemed to sleep. Tucked deep in a forgotten part of the countryside, it was surrounded by thick woods, veiled in mist most of the year, and held together by tradition and whispers. It was the sort of place where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were rare. At the heart of Eld Hollow stood the old clinic, weathered stone, ivy-cloaked walls, and a single flickering lantern that never went out. It had been there for generations, passed down through a long line of village doctors. For the last 30 years, that responsibility belonged to Dr. Aldrich Meru. He was tall and silver-haired, with steady hands and kind eyes that made even the most nervous patients feel safe. He delivered every child born in Eld Hollow since the 90s, and in that time, not a single mother had died in childbirth. To the villagers, he was not just a doctor, he was a miracle worker. They praised him, trusted him, worshipped him in their own quiet way. And yet, there was one thing they never questioned, though they all noticed it. Every year, at least one newborn would die. There was always an explanation: complications, stillbirth, premature lungs, a weak heart. And always, it was Dr. Meru who gently broke the news, tears glistening in his eyes, voice heavy with sorrow. He would bury the infants himself, in the clinic's small graveyard behind the building. The families, devastated, never questioned him. After all, he had saved so many others. No one ever asked to see the bodies. Not until Mina Holt. She was 22, sharp-eyed and skeptical. She'd grown up in the village but left for the city after school, vowing never to return. But life in the city had its own horrors, and when she found herself pregnant and alone, she came back to Eld Hollow, the one place that had always offered safety. She stayed with her mother, who assured her she was in good hands with Dr. Meru. "He's delivered every child in this village, including you," her mother said with pride. "There's no one better." And so Mina went, hesitant but trusting. The old clinic was exactly as she remembered, dimly lit, always smelling faintly of dried herbs and something metallic underneath. Dr. Meru greeted her with a warm smile and a paternal hand on her shoulder. His touch was firm, comforting, reassuring. "Don't worry," he said. "You and the baby are in safe hands." But as the weeks went by, Mina began to notice oddities. The way the doctor's office was always locked after hours. The faint sounds, like a baby crying, coming from beneath the floorboards at night. And the graveyard, there were far more markers than she remembered. Dozens of tiny headstones. Too many for a village this small. She asked her mother, who only shook her head. "It's tragic, yes. But sometimes these things happen." It didn't sit right with Mina. Her unease turned to terror one rainy night, just a week before her due date. She awoke to a dull ache in her stomach and stumbled to the clinic. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the lantern still burned, casting long shadows on the stone walls. But the waiting room was empty. From below, she heard it again, soft, distant cries. Not just one, several. Wailing. Then, abruptly, silence. Drawn by something deeper than curiosity, Mina crept past the exam rooms and into the back corridor, where a rusted staircase led down to the basement. A chain had been strung across it, marked restricted. She hesitated, then stepped over it. The basement was darker than it should have been, and the air was thick with rot. At the far end was a heavy wooden door, iron-banded, partially open. Inside, she found what no one was ever meant to see. Rows of glass tanks lined the walls, each filled with a pale, viscous fluid. Floating inside were malformed infants, limbs twisted, eyes too large or missing entirely, mouths stretched open in eternal screams. Some appeared human, others didn't. There were runes etched into the glass, old symbols that hurt to look at. In the center of the room stood an altar, ancient and cracked, stained dark with age. And beside it, Dr. Meru. He didn't look surprised to see her. "I had hoped you'd be different, Mina," he said softly, almost mournful. "Stronger than the others. But curiosity, it's a dangerous thing." She backed away, heart racing. What is this?" He approached, his expression grave. "I am the last keeper of Eld Hollow's pact. This village survives because of sacrifice. Every year, a child must be given, not just dead but offered. They feed something far older than you or I, something that dwells beneath the woods. It keeps the crops growing, the sickness away, the peace intact. You kill babies? She whispered, horrified. No, he said. Not kill. Transform. They are remade, given to the forest, to the ancient thing that sleeps beneath its roots. And in return, Eld Hollow thrives. Mina shook her head. You're insane. Dr. Mara's expression didn't change. Perhaps. But it's worked for hundreds of years. You've seen how this village never suffers. No famine. No plagues. No war ever touches it. She turned to run, but he was faster than he looked. His hand closed around her arm with impossible strength, pulling her back toward the altar. The forest must be fed, Mina. And your child is next. But she screamed and kicked, and in a moment of desperation, drove her fingernails into his face. He recoiled, and she fled, barreling up the stairs, out into the storm. She didn't stop until she reached the constable's house. The next morning they returned to the clinic. It was empty. The tanks, the altar, the basement room gone. The door that led down had vanished, replaced with solid stone. There was no trace of Dr. Meru. Only the graveyard remained. The village was shaken, but in time, they whispered it away. Said Mina must have imagined it, brought on by pregnancy stress, city nerves, or postpartum fear. But Mina knew what she'd seen. And when her son was born, healthy, strong, and wide-eyed, she left Eld Hollow for good. But the village changed after that. Crops began to fail. A fever swept through the town. Accidents increased. Some said the forest had turned against them. Others whispered that the pact had been broken. Years later, when Mina's son was 10, he began to draw strange shapes. Symbols. Runes. He spoke of voices in the trees. Dreams of something cold and ancient reaching for him beneath the soil. And one night, he whispered, "The doctor still watches, Mama. He's waiting." Mina stared at her son as the words left his mouth. His voice wasn't trembling, wasn't frightened. It was flat. Calm. As if he were reciting something he didn't fully understand. Her heart seized. "The doctor still watches, Mama. He's waiting." That night, she didn't sleep. She sat beside her son's bed, watching him breathe, his chest rising and falling in the soft glow of a nightlight. He seemed peaceful. But the runes he had drawn on the back of his notebook weren't peaceful. They were identical to the ones etched into the glass tanks she had seen in that cursed basement. She had never described them to him, never even spoken of Eld Hollow since they'd left. They lived 2 towns over now, in a modest cottage with a wide lawn and neighbors who minded their own business. She worked from home, kept to herself. She had tried, so hard, to give her son a normal life. But something had followed them. Over the next few weeks, it worsened. He would wake up crying, saying the woods were calling to him, even though their home was miles from any forest. Birds started dying in their yard, always arranged in strange patterns, perfect spirals or circles with one missing piece. On the 3rd week, Mina found a single white flower blooming in the basement corner. It was the same kind that grew wild in Eld Hollow's graveyard. She began to research again, obsessively. She dove into ancient local lore, records hidden in church archives and old university folklore journals. Mentions of a forest spirit, the Hollowed One, appeared sporadically. Described as a root dweller, older than time, nourished not by death alone but by innocence. The pact began with a healer, a doctor who had been driven mad by plague. The spirit offered protection for the village, in exchange for 1 newborn soul every year. It had never stopped. The doctors were chosen, taught, initiated. And Dr. Meru, he had been the last. Until now. She couldn't deny the signs any longer. Her son wasn't just haunted. He was marked. Mina drove in the dead of night, headlights slicing through the fog. Her son slept in the back seat, clutching a small satchel of books. His breath was steady, but every now and then, he whispered in his sleep, "They're waiting." The ground is hungry. Eld Hollow hadn't changed. The mist still clung to the trees like cobwebs, and the narrow road into the village seemed even darker than she remembered. As she passed the clinic, her headlights flickered. It was still there, but the graveyard was larger now. Dozens more tiny stones. She parked at the edge of the woods and carried her son to the old well near the edge of the clinic property, the one the village children used to whisper about, saying it had no bottom. She placed him gently on the grass and drew the runes around the well, just as the texts had said. If the pact had been broken, there had to be a way to bind it, to trap it. She wasn't going to let the hollowed one take him, not like the others. But as she lit the final candle, the ground trembled. From the woods came a low, resonant hum, like wind moaning through a hollow trunk. Shapes moved between the trees. And then, from the clinic's back door, someone stepped out. Dr. Merrow. He hadn't aged a day. You brought him back, he said, smiling faintly. I knew you would. Mina raised the old bone dagger she'd taken from one of the grave markers. You're not touching him. But Merrow only stepped closer. The pact is older than us. Older than love. You've delayed it, but it never ends. He's been chosen, Mina. And, if you fight it, something worse will take his place. Perhaps 100 others. Is that what you want? She faltered. Just for a second. In that second, Merrow lunged. But this time, Mina was ready. She drove the dagger into his chest. Not his heart, but lower, where the runes had instructed. He howled. Not a human sound, but a guttural, splintering shriek that split the night open. The wind exploded outward. The candles burst. And then silence. The doctor crumpled. And beneath him, the earth opened, swallowing him whole. Mina pulled her son into her arms as the well sealed itself shut. The mist began to lift. And from the woods, the whispering stopped. Eld Hollow was gone. A fire had swept through it weeks after Mina's return. They said it started in the clinic, old wiring perhaps. No one survived. But the nearby towns sometimes reported hearing cries in the trees on windless nights. And Mina's son? He stopped drawing the runes. But he still speaks to the shadows when he thinks no one's listening. And sometimes, when she checks on him late at night, he's standing at the window, staring into the dark, whispering, "Thank you, doctor. I remember."